Okay, hello everyone. I think we'll get started. We have about half the registered people joining us. So, hello, I am Tina. I am Finn's Student Outreach Ambassador, and Alexa and I will be hosting the session for you. With us later, we'll be joined by Susan and Honey as they answer some of our questions about navigating the GC jobs maze and the unconventional path that you can take to get there. So welcome to the session. As I mentioned, it's going to be talking about the GC jobs maze. So how to find jobs, a little bit on how to apply for jobs. We would like to acknowledge that this is a really big topic to cover in really just under half an hour when you consider that our panel is going to be the second half. So if you do have any questions, please, all of our info should be linked in both the registration page, and I'm sure we can drop it in the chat later on. Feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions later on. Today's session will consist of walking you through some of the different paths you can find, and then, as I mentioned, the panel. So I'll hand it off to Alexa.
Thank you, Tina. We are grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. As we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat space and questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. You can vote for your questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. Thank you for joining us today again.
All right, so before we get started, we do acknowledge that Finn does attract a really good mix of people, both students, young professionals, and even mature professionals and students. So we do have a tip specifically for students that are joining us today. Your jobs maze might look a little bit different than the one you've heard about, or even the one we're going to talk about today. And that's because you have a little bit of an edge. You're already in the government. And the hardest part about trying to work for the government is getting in the government in the first place. So congratulations, you've already done that. One foot is in the door. So if you like the job you're at, we really encourage you to think about it as a stepping stone. And even if you don't really like it, if you can tolerate it, try and use this position as your stepping stone again to the government full time. If you're in a co-op term and you really like it, or even if you don't, there are options to work part-time as a student. And we encourage you to really think about this a little bit. And if you're interested in staying with the government, which we hope you are, we encourage you to consider working part-time throughout the rest of your studies. More and more students are doing this. So personally, I was a co-op student. I got bridged in. We don't call it bridging anymore. I was bridged in, and the best piece of advice I ever received was to try and stay on past my co-op term in hopes of getting bridged in to the government permanently. And to really basically see it as a stepping stone. Once you're in the government, you can go anywhere, but focus on getting in first.
So as a disclaimer, if you're unfamiliar with the terms such as casual, term, or indeterminate, please refer to our resource page for this BLS session. It can be found on our wiki as well. So moving on. The most common avenue in the pursuit for a job in the government is via the formal pathways to employment. So think competitions and inventories. Perhaps the most well-known website in the GC job maze is the GC Jobs website. Donc, qu'est-ce qui est disponible pour les étudiants sur jobs.gc.ca? En tant qu'étudiant ou nouvel employé du gouvernement, vous ne savez peut-être pas à quoi sert la page Emploi GC. Le site web Emploi GC offre de nombreuses possibilités destinées spécifiquement aux étudiants. La page Emploi GC est particulièrement utile lorsque vous recherchez des opportunités pour les étudiants, des programmes de développement et des postes de premier échelon, car sont fréquemment affichés par les voies officielles. I'm still a student. Should I be applying to jobs now if I have another year of school left? That's a good question. Not interested in a full-time job yet? That's okay. The GC jobs process can take several months and up to 2 years. By applying early, you're actually saving yourself delays in your timelines down the road. If you do get in a pool and you are a former student, this is a great leverage to use in the informal jobs maze. More on that later on. Je ne vois rien qui m'intéresse. Que faire maintenant? Si vous savez que vous êtes intéressé par un domaine ou un service particulier, vous pouvez paramétrer des notifications par courriel via Emploi GC afin que les notifications soient envoyées directement dans votre boîte de réception. Et si vous avez vraiment du mal à trouver un emploi qui vous intéresse, il existe de nombreuses voies via le marché du travail informel qui peut vous aider à trouver un emploi qui vous intéresse vraiment. And I will leave the rest of that up to Tina. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexa. So as we mentioned, there's, we call it jobs maze for a reason. It's because there are several ways to get there. And applying on the jobs.jc.ca website might not be for everyone, and it isn't for everyone, but there are other avenues you can pursue to try and get a job in the government. So we like to call this the informal jobs maze, which is, social media, any of those networking platforms that you see public servants on, they're there for a reason. So chances are you might have even seen a job posting on LinkedIn or even Facebook and sometimes even Twitter. That's for a reason. Posting these opportunities on social media and kind of spreading the word via this informal networking, it's becoming more and more commonplace today because that's where a lot of the talent is. This is great though. This is a huge opportunity for public servants because it gives you an even bigger playing field, so to speak. So really broadly, I know I was a former student just under a year ago. I've only been indeterminate a year. I was really afraid to post on social media and comment on these job postings and reach out to managers. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to comment on these job postings. Don't be afraid to speak to people, but don't be afraid to also promote yourself as a stellar government employee, a stellar government student, whatever you may be. Use these platforms to really promote yourself, your work, and kind of who you are as a person. Hint, Finn has had some VLS sessions on having an online presence and building your social media. We do have those resources. You should check them out and keep your eye on Finn programming because they do talk about this pretty frequently. Anyways, though, for today's purposes, we're just going to talk about the jobs maze. And I wanted to touch on one platform specifically, which is Facebook. Facebook is so powerful because there are a ton of informal government groups on Facebook that are kind of dedicated just to posting jobs and really advertising either yourself or your team if you're hiring. In these groups, you can actually search for these posted jobs, and it's really encouraged to reach out to the job posters. You can reach out if you have questions, hey, I qualified in the pool on jobs.gc.ca. Would that improve my hiring chances? Often, yes. You can also use it as an opportunity to promote who you are and see if you might be a good fit for the team. Just going to scroll down. So there are several Facebook job groups that are available. We've linked a couple. We have a resource for you. But I encourage you, if you just kind of search in the search bar on Facebook, GC blank, often something will come up. There's a community for GC policy. There's a GC administrative community. There's GC comms. There's even a GC job swap page. So there's a lot of options out there for you. I think the main takeaway here should really be, though, that this isn't the jobs maze that it used to be, which is formal competitions and really formal processes. The jobs maze here is becoming really, really unconventional. You can use social media to showcase yourself, your skills, and your interests. You can reach out to prospective managers. And if you don't find opportunities you can also use it as an opportunity to network until you do, or to connect with people in the fields you're interested in, to share your CV. You can pick people's brains, and you'd be surprised at how many opportunities come up from networking alone. And again, Finn hosts a lot of sessions on this, so we encourage you to check them out and kind of leverage the tool you have here. So now that we're on the topic of the unconventional, we'll loop in our panelists a little bit to kind of talk to us about their unconventional path, basically, and how they got where they are, and some tips they may have for you. So the second portion today is going to have Hani Dakane with us, who is the Executive Director of the Benefits Delivery Modernization at ESDC, and Susan Johnson, who is the Lead of Partnerships and Engagement at OCRO and Research and Experimentation at the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat. So welcome, Hani. Welcome, Susan. Thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you.
Tina. I'll let Susan and Honey just say, a nice little brief intro, a little hi, and then we can get started.
Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. Hani Dak and I joining you from Toronto and my home in Toronto, and really excited to talk about my journey here, which I'm here actually as in the Government of Canada via the interchange program, which is also a very unusual path to kind of join the Government of Canada. And so can't wait to learn more from you and also share my experience.
Thank you, Honey. I'll leave it to Susan.
Thank you, Alexa, and thanks to everyone. I'm super excited to be here today. I just received a long service award, and I'm kind of shocked because it still feels like yesterday that I was doing contract after casual. Definitely not convinced that I wanted to be a public servant in any jurisdiction. I really wasn't sure. And so did lots of exploring at that point, and I'm glad to be here today to talk, to learn from all of you, and I think implicitly to support the people who've been so supportive of me along the path too. So thanks so much, Alexa.
Thank you, and congratulations, Susan. I will jump right into it. We do have a lot of questions locked and loaded for both Susan and Honey. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask both Honey and Susan the first question. So tell us briefly how you came to your current dream job. Racontez-nous brièvement comment vous êtes arrivé à votre emploi actuel de rêve. So I guess I'll let Susan go first, or Honey, it's up to both of you. Okay.
All right. All right. Thank you. And first, apologies for a little bit of construction noise. I hope that's not coming through. Just urban life. But okay, so my current job is a bit long-winded. So I've been in the public service technically for about 14 years, and so almost straight out of school. And the job I'm in probably existed in a different form. And so if I work in digital, and so a lot of the jobs that I ended up going to, I didn't imagine even 2 years before as roles that I would be that would exist in government, that would actually also be legitimate sort of roles to undertake. And so there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of new ground that feels like it's still currently being made or remade. But I guess one of the things that in common, it's still rooted in wanting to do better by people. And so I think government's always changing. And so I think that's probably the most, the most coherent way I could explain it as I move from jobs to the next. And so just a quick tour of my career history. Began in the Ontario Public Service as a web developer, applying to a newspaper ad back in the day. And from there also ended up working in IT policy and then open government. And then the Ontario Digital Service was created shortly after that, and then moved to the federal government with the Canada School of Public Service Digital Academy, and now with Service Canada. I'm drawn usually to the mission and the mandate and the teams themselves. And so really that's usually what drives me with each move.
Well, thank you, Honey, for your answer. I'll let Susan go next.
Oh, thank you, Alexa. Merci. I think I would pick up on what Honey said about mission and mandate and the teams, and perhaps add a third. And the really practical question around how you spend your day. I did some co-op terms in the provincial government back in the day. It was Ontario for me. And I would say I'll tell the short story and then I can add a little bit of flavor to it. I'm part of a mobility program called the Free Agents. And what attracted me to that was really having a mid-ish career pivot and saying, okay, I really care about dialogue. I care about public engagement, about good convening, about working as one government, and I mean across jurisdictions as well, and also working thoughtfully with other sectors. So where do you do that? I mean, there are a lot of different roles where you can. I was really blessed to learn a number of things at PCO, and then had a chance to, from there, do assignments at NRCan, a one-year assignment at the School of Public Service that turned into 27 months. And I'm now at OCRO looking at, okay, how can we apply experimentation? How can we apply different kinds of human-centered design to our work? So how did I get there in each case? I'd say it's a variation on the same. The first place I would go to look for a job is inward. What do you want? What do you care about? And I mean that in terms of issues. I mean that in terms of skills. And again, about how you spend your day, because you're going to spend a lot of time doing it. My first federal job was actually at what's now Global Affairs. I was doing my master's in international affairs. Easy fit, right? No, I was hired because I could code. And where I'm going here is sometimes unconventional skills pay. And not to say coding is unconventional in any way, but at that time in that role, it was a little bit niche. So I think I come back to what's helped me the most and what did with this role was thinking quite deeply about what I wanted. I wanted to work with other people to build things. And I approached some people whose advice I really appreciate and talked about, okay, like where to go to do those things. Because as you talk about the jobs maze, there are so many and there are so many possibilities. I find the more you can think about what you want first, the more it helps. So I went and I talked to my wise people, said, I think this is what I want to do next. Does this make sense? We talked it through and said yes. And then I reached out to a few people and said, okay, I'm looking for roles in these kinds of areas. This is what I can bring to the table, because it's always good to be able to name your skills. But this is where I'd like to grow, because it's always good to be able to tell them that too. And they're assessing for fit. And then, so with this most recent role, I had reached out to a few different organizations and was able to have really honest conversations about what I wanted. And poof, I'm on a small, very new team doing its experimentation work at Treasury Board. I will stop there for now. Thanks, Alexa.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Susan. And I think you touched on a really great point, which is that you reached out to your network and you bounced ideas off of others. And that's a very underrated skill to have, being able to reach out and connect with others. And we certainly encourage students and young employees to do the same. Find a network, find mentors, bounce ideas, even just see where the jobs are. And it's a really great way to kind of find your footing in the government, because as a student, it's kind of daunting coming in. And I'm still daunted most of the time. So I will pass on a question to Honey now. Honey, why don't you tell us the most unconventional part of your journey?
I came into the public service with a lot of assumptions about the public service. And I honestly was glad that a lot of them were wrong. And I was astonished, for example, by the generosity, like the pay it forward notion, for example, of like a lot of more senior public servants who offer to meet you for coffee, who offered to actually give you a lot of advice, help you introduce you, widen your network, because somebody did it for them. And so that is an unspoken tradition. And now I'm talking about it because I feel like I'm doing this because this is something that you will be doing too, and hope that you'll be doing this for others who will be coming your way. The other assumption I had was that, to be honest, getting in required a particular type of individual. So somebody who was very outgoing to begin with, extroverted, reaching out. The person I was 14 years ago was extremely shy, socially awkward, afraid to, especially I was a really good student. So I figured, okay, my work will speak for itself. That's really enough. And honestly, it was that, but it was really also about building relationships. So maybe it's not about networking, but actually just being yourself, like being encouraged to be yourself and not turn yourself into somebody you're not, so that you can continue to, and so finding people who are like that was probably like the most unconventional part, and really changed and steered and also made me think about this. And then the third part was not thinking that the public service was going to be a lifelong calling. Didn't expect to fall in love with a mission, and cannot unsee complexity. For example, cannot sort of unsee for how things affect every part of your life, and every part, and how government has that impact, and which I know can't is not the kind of thing that you'd be able to get anywhere when it comes to personal, professional fulfillment. And so that's probably, those are the most unconventional things for me.
Thank you, Hani. Yeah, that was very inspiring, coming from you were very intimidated to look at now speaking as a panelist. So congratulations, Hani. Very well said. I'm going to now ask the next question to Susan.
Is it okay if I take that question too? I can combine them
together. Yeah, of course. Thank you, Susan. You go.
Yeah, that's okay. Because I think one of the pieces I would build on what Hani was saying, all of what Hani spoke to resonates really strongly with me as well, in terms of we're here, but you're going to be supporting the people that are coming after you. And in fact, we as public servants are all supporting one another. If we want to offer the best that we can for Canadians, that means strengthening our net too. It really does matter. And it's surprising where the generosity comes, but it appears in the most beautiful places. And I think what I would talk about in terms of unconventional was I didn't expect to make a career change halfway through my public service career and stay in. And we go back to, I came in for international affairs. I care very deeply about it at a state and at a multi-stakeholder level. I spent years building collaboration on communications infrastructure, and loved it. And there was no universe where I thought I could ever want to do anything else because it was the best. And then I turned around, I hit my mid-30s and went, this has been really fantastic, but maybe I want to do something else and I don't know what that is. And that was a terrifying feeling because I had known up until then. And so what do you do when you're mid-career or early career? It doesn't matter, and you're not sure, and you have to go find it out. And it's called Go Exploring. I made a list of stuff I was curious about. I was on extended parental leave at one point, and something I would think about is I've taken some long sabbaticals from the public service, and they've made me a better public servant. Administratively, there are some folks that don't like them. I think they're really helpful. And so for me, it meant going back to school. It meant building a small business. It meant doing some community governance work, all of which I'm really happy about how I was able to serve in other ways, and all of which helped me articulate the next path. So yeah, when you're not sure, it's the go leap. Something that is amazing about working in a giant institution is that you can make a list of all the things you're curious about. And there are micro missions. And if we need to explain that, we can do that too. But if you want to go try something, and for lack of better words, try the thing on before you commit, you can. And that's a reasonable thing to do, and it's a reasonable need to name. And I'm really blessed with the supervisors who I've been able to go and talk to and have really open conversations about, I think this is for me, I think this is not for me. Can we try it? And it's either going to land or not. Most people will take a risk on a time limited piece. Okay, said it. There you go, Alexa. So.
Perfect. No, thank you, honestly, to both Honey and Susan sharing personal stories. Very inspiring, to all of us. And it's hard to share your stories to, strangers or everyone. So thank you so much. In fact, we believe that both your answers are so good that we just want to start asking both of you the questions now instead of alternating. So I'm going to ask the question in English, then French, and then you get to respond in the language of your choice. I hope that's okay with the panelists. All right, beautiful. Next question. What do you think most students or new public servants don't think of, or what are they afraid to try? À votre avis, à quoi la plupart des étudiants ou les nouveaux fonctionnaires ne pensent-ils pas? Ou qu'est-ce qu'ils ont peur d'essayer? I guess I'll let Honey go first to answer that question.
Thanks. And so so I'm trying to look back to the time where I still consider myself a student because I keep going back to school for different things. And so the things that I tend to I think that's probably unknown going in, and it's really overwhelming, is that just the structure of government and just the size, especially of the organization. And so that part is usually daunting, and that people will actually answer a question like if you just ask. And so there's a lot of information, but not a lot filtered. And so there are a lot of people who will help you kind of find your way. There are also like informal networks. And so like the Federal Youth Network. And then, of course, the Canada School of Public Service has a lot of supports that are available for all public servants that again, I don't think it's promoted enough when it comes to supports for students, and that all of those opportunities are available. And then, of course, the different career options and employment types. HR feels opaque, and the different options, informal or formal, are really not written, or and so. It really and it takes demystifying, and so I think that's usually the first part. Likely we'll come up with other ones later on in terms of but yeah, it's like those are the ones that come to mind almost immediately.
I'd like to build on something Honey said as well. I was remembering, Honey, when you were talking about feeling uncomfortable reaching out, and the assumption that pursuing a job took, let's call it a highly confident extrovert. I like talking. I like microphones now. I'm not always an extrovert, and I was definitely 100 times less as you go back in time. The thought of cold calling, like, there's not a lot I wouldn't do to avoid it. And the thought of cold calling people to see if they've got a job, not on. Like, that is just not Susan. Yet I'm still employed, and it was still almost all of my roles came from informal reach out. What I found I could do was reach out informally. Could I ask people about their career? Could I ask people for advice? Could I ask people where they thought someone with my skills and my interests might be a good fit? That didn't scare me. So I could do that. But it took some time. L'autre chose que j'aimerais discuter, and I'll talk briefly about it, c'est l'art du pitch. Quelque chose que j'ai vraiment apprécié, c'est une leçon d'une collègue de moi qui a écrit beaucoup de petits paragraphes concernant les projets qu'il aimerait le faire. I met a guy he was another public servant, although I met him through an informal network, who keeps all kinds of paragraphs and one-pagers in his back pocket, not of jobs he wants, but of things he'd like to do. And he just keeps them handy so that he could talk to people about, here's a project I'd love to do. Here's a project I'd love to do. And it changes the conversation a little bit from, will you hire me, to, I have some things I'd like to get done. Would you like to fund them? Or, it's also the initiative of, I've been thinking we need to get that done too. And you've already thought it through. Isn't that great? And if you've passed secondary school now, you've probably had to write pitches as part of school. I've been watching lots of homeschool going on beside me. They can be giant projects, they can be teeny tiny projects, but have them available, and not necessarily for hard sell, but just a little bit of pitching is good. And I'll build on what Honey said too. We were both at CSPS, in case you can't tell, but there is amazing learning and little tiny pieces of it. And I think about good writing skills are always worth it. Good data skills are gold. Good speaking skills, really helpful. Good digital, defined very broadly. So, going and getting some, and like little courses and little fluency in what the idea is going to really help your unconventional paths. Okay, that's all for me.
Thank you, Susan. You both said so many things I wish we could touch on, but I think we'd be talking for hours if we did that. But Susan gave us a really nice segue for our next question. So rather than me talking at all of you, I'll give them another opportunity to hopefully enlighten us some more. So Susan, I'll start with you since you just finished. What skill or trait or competency, like data or digital, as you just mentioned, are there any particular ones you would recommend for people that you think they might need to take the unconventional path?
So I'm biased here, and my number 1 through 10 bias is towards curiosity. Because you don't have to know the thing. But we go back to, and if I could, and if somebody can Google this faster than me and pop it in the chat, it's an organization in the UK that talks about policy and innovation skills for the future. And I mean, they are not the only skills that we need, but they're a really good set of traits to think about. The organization is called Nesta, and I will also put it in the chat when I stop talking if someone doesn't get there faster than me. But it talks about traits of, think about what can't be replaced by machines. So let's start there. What kind of skills can we use to think of new things, to ask new questions? Do you remember when Honey talked about she can't unsee complexity and the vastness of this institution we have as a public service and things to do with it? Well, how do we figure out what to do? How do we figure out where we can help? Apologize, there's construction going on out my window too. And so I would rank, curiosity as 1 through 10. And I'm going to pass the mic over. And if there's more to say, I'm happy to come back to it.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan. You're gonna laugh. I had one word right here. It has curiosity, and so completely agree. I think that is probably the first thing. And so I always compare I remember reading somewhere that pretty much being a public servant is pretty much like being dragonfly-eyed. And so a dragonfly has about 200 lenses in each eye. And so you're always seeing, zooming in and out, always filtering and focusing depending on the issue of the day, but never quite, you're always balancing the short and long term. And so sharpening each of those lenses is pretty much the order of the day for a lifelong sort of journey. And that's probably I guess the metaphor that I'm using. But among that sort of adaptability and likely being able to pretty much run with the changing circumstances. Nobody would have anticipated mental models to shift the way they have, for example, during the pandemic. And so that's another part. And then the other superpower that comes to mind, and it's probably not measured enough, but empathy. And so especially in spades, like for each other, for everybody, and then never losing sight of sort of the person you're serving at the end of the day. Like, what is all this work for? And that's usually the thing that clears up the clutter when it comes to really thorny governance or thorny sort of processes. Sort of, wait, what are going back to that sort of what are we trying to do? And so that type of lens is probably the most important one, and also not appreciated enough.
Definitely. And I think what I'm hearing from the both of you, if I might interject, is that, don't underestimate the power of your soft skills and the power of you as a person. You can learn anything you want to, but, being the kind person, the one that's curious and willing to learn and adapt, it does matter despite what you might think. Susan, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Last one. Okay. And I'll build on that maybe with one of just a resilience to failure. I might be here with good things to say and stories to tell, but like everybody, came with a lot of hard lessons along the way. Take the hard lessons. You don't have to love them, but let them serve you and, make the lemonade out of the lemons. Like, as cheesy as it is, it's things don't necessarily go the way you want, and you don't necessarily get where you're going in the maze the first time or the first 10 times. But you can get to some really cool places because you're reaching out and trying. Okay.
Thank you to both of you. And Tina, too. What a great trio. I just feel like the conversation's flowing so nicely. I wish we had more time. But I do have to continue on to the next question for both of you. So are there any specific topics or learning that you recommend? Example, understanding the structure or funding. Y a-t-il des sujets ou des apprentissages spécifiques que vous recommandez? Par exemple, comprendre la structure, le financement. Honey, you can go next if you like to answer.
And so if you are working in digital government or any part that is involved in changing the way government works, the foundation part, you need to have a really firm grasp of the foundation, sort of understand the org that you're changing, how power flows, what that actually looks like, and also understand sort of organizational design and behavior, and start to study it, and look for opportunities to likely learn about it either in person, ask to observe a meeting, ask to and watch how some of these happen. And I know the CSPS offers a lot of the theory behind it, but it's nothing quite like seeing it in action. And then also be around during or if possible, ask people about their experience during the writ period or government transition, which is the period where government feels like it's quiet on social media, but that's actually where you see what happens in government when there is no, when a lot of our political masters are pretty much out sort of campaigning. And so what is going on and this is usually the time where different departments are taking stock of their current issues of the day and their different priorities. And it's a really good time to learn about how government actually works behind the scenes. And that's where I found like a lot of like the rich learning was happening there. Ask for a variety of experiences. And so I would go with like work in a department that does delivery, but also a central agency. And so I feel like I spent most of my career in central agency. And so I'm currently trying to balance that. And so again, look for, and then the last bit, I guess, specific topics of learning, my personal bias and also declaring it because I'm always recruiting. And so as Susan mentioned, data and digital are data and digital policy. And so I think those two topics are nascent. They're not only changing the way government is working, meaning the public administration part of government, but there isn't a single public policy area that doesn't stand to be transformed for better or much, much worse by those two topics in the coming years.
Thank you, Hani. I agree. Susan, would you like to answer?
Sure. I would say, so everything Honey said, and she's spot on. I would encourage people to try different kinds of organizations. I went the other way. So my co-op terms were a mix of provincial government and private sector, and both Canada and abroad. And then I came to the federal government. I left the federal government and went to a crown. I came back. Trying those. I think the first thing that I would add is around, have I been on mute the whole time? Oh no, okay.
No, just the last 5 seconds.
Okay. I would say create something or champion something. Entrepreneurship, I find, is sometimes a stuffy word, but take something on and lead it, because we can talk about leaders at every level and it matters. Like learn what it takes to build a thing and see it thrive inside your organization. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, but take something and see it through from end to end. And because the blessings along the way, and in particular the obstacles, will give you experience that will serve you really well all along the way.
Go ahead, Honey.
I absolutely love that. Thank you. That's the other part. It's more like seeing something from end to end is really amazing. And also it's easy to start something, but never easy to finish. And so if finishing things is pretty much that's your credibility. If you're asking somebody to change the way they work, they want to see your scars. They want to see what you they want to hear about your journey and what you struggled with, what you went through to get there.
Thank you so much, Susan and Honey. I do see we have a lot of questions in the Q&A, so I'll actually bring in Josh to come moderate for us now for the rest of the time we have. And Alexa and I and Susan and Honey will try to answer as many of your questions as we can.
Absolutely. Alors, je vois qu'on a beaucoup de questions dans les fonctions questions et réponses. So we have a lot of questions in the Q&A. I'm going to jump to some quick ones for some quick responses so we can kind of get through as many as possible. The first one, would you recommend pursuing graduate studies before looking at a long-term government career, or is a bachelor's degree enough? Who would like to jump in on this?
I can jump in, and then if Susan wants to as well, that'd be great. So I definitely don't think you need graduate studies. However, I did it, and I loved it, but B, it actually taught me a lot of the skills I needed to be a successful public servant. And also graduate studies is a really great way. For example, my undergraduate degree was psychology, but I knew later on, I knew I wanted to be in the government. So I was able to get into a graduate program that was a little more relevant to what I wanted to do. And then it helped me really build that breadth of experience I went from psychology to international affairs, and now I'm working in trade and I work with Finn on the side. So it definitely does open some doors for you, but it is not the be all end all. That's not the path for you. Susan?
I think I get to the same place that Tina went, but a slightly different along the way. Do you need grad school for a successful federal career? I would answer no. I think the reason to go to grad school is because you want to go to grad school, because you want to do the work that you can do while you're a graduate student. I wanted to move to Ottawa. I wanted to move into the world of international affairs. That was a lot more accessible to me by doing the graduate degree than not. I did the same thing again 15 years later when I wanted to learn more about conflict resolution. I did another program. And like Honey, I end up in school a lot now. Grad school is a tool, but there are certain jobs. I've got a Health Canada researcher in my household. You need your graduate degree to do that, but I would see them as separate, but very complementary.
Absolutely. I'll just add, I work with a lot of senior leaders, a lot of different deputy ministers, and the variety of experience for deputy ministers is from those who have bachelor's degrees to those who have PhDs and medical degrees. Like there's every variety of leader in between there. So it really, I think, depends on what you're wanting to do. You can't, come in wanting to be a doctor with a bachelor's degree, for example. But you could, there are lots of paths for those who have a bachelor's degree, and there are lots of opportunities that we've sort of addressed in the Q&A in terms of education leave and other ways that you can pursue graduate studies after you start, if that's an option you want to pursue. The next question. So this is our top voted question. Tips and tricks on how to get a placement in a different department and specific areas of policy. So there were a number of questions on like, how do I kind of get experience? I think especially for students, how do you get experience in different departments? Maybe the job you're in now isn't what you're wanting to pursue long term. Alors, est-ce que vous avez des pensées par rapport à cette question? Alors, des idées pour comment trouver des placements dans les différents départements ou agences? Tina.
I'll keep it super quick. This I could talk about forever. Basically, if you're interested in kind of learning a little bit more, switching around, whatever it may be, you can consider cold emailing managers. That worked really well for me. It lets you kind of show them who you are as a person, but also why you're interested. Because sometimes your interest matters more than your experience. If you're smart person, if you're studious, if you have that good work ethic, you can learn. Another really good way, especially if you're interested in a specific field of policy, there are a lot of really good networks inside of desk enterprises you can join. There's a lot of think tanks, for example. If you're a woman interested in defense, there's the Woman in Defense network you can join. So I encourage you to look into that. And that's a really good way to buff up your resume and show that, I might not have professional experience, but here's how interested I am. I do this on the side.
That's a very good idea. Absolutely.
I just want to add, if that's okay, to what Tina said. Tina's the pro on this answer. She's your go-to girl. I just want to add that, don't feel discouraged with maybe rejection or, a manager or someone not answering you. Like, please don't let that get you down. Like, don't let it end your journey. Please push through. It kind of reflects on what Honey and Susan was saying. Like, we don't always get to the finish line, but it's not a race, as long as you're putting one step forward. So that's the only tip that I would add. Thank you.
Absolutely. And yeah, be cognizant of who you're trying to connect with. So if you're trying to, like we said in our student event a couple of weeks ago, if you're trying to connect with a deputy minister, they might not answer you immediately. They might have other things that are on their mind during a global pandemic. The next question kind of speaks to this, around LinkedIn and use of social media. So the question is, what advice do you have for people who, for a variety of reasons, are uncomfortable having personal social media accounts? If someone's uncomfortable posting their personal life and private information online, how do they create a professional job presence? Who would like to start with this question? Maybe I'll start off with just an idea of, like, your LinkedIn can be as private or as public as you want. It doesn't have to be a public profile. It can be that you create it and you only allow that information to be shared with people who you add to your network. You are able to add everyone or no one to your network. So lots of these options exist. Twitter, same thing. Instagram, same thing. And you can utilize those options for sure. Tina, over to you.
Yeah. Oh, I think we lost Susan. I was just going to say the same thing. It's your level of comfort. And some people are hesitant having social media. I personally did not have a Twitter until I became a public servant. And to keep it professional, I think the best thing you can do then, no one's making you post about your personal life. So post about your interests, post about work. Hey, I don't personally post anything super personal on my LinkedIn, but I really like to reshare posts from groups I believe in, or, really big news from my organization. Like Josh said, it's really in your control, but I do recommend at least having that presence in the first place. Especially Twitter. I'd like to point out, I feel like Twitter is super underrated, especially among students today. I love Twitter. I have met so many incredible public servants on Twitter. Like, for example, Jen, who's the reason I work in Finn right now, Jen McDougall, who's also part of Finn. And it's a really great way to meet people and to show them who you are in a way that's really authentic. And, if you're interested in something and they know you're interested in it, they might help you make that job switch. Hint, hint.
Absolutely. Alexa?
Yes, I want to second what Tina said. That's absolutely right. Like, you never know what opportunities might pop up. Anything that has to do with the internet, is kind of scary, even for me. Like, whatever you put on there could be there forever. It could cause a ruckus or, whatever. So definitely be careful of what you post. But my personal opinion is that I actually have 2 accounts for everything, and one's locked and private. And I only follow friends and family, and not because I'm posting inappropriate stuff, not at all. It's just not job specific, not something that I would want my colleagues to know that, I redid the backyard or something. I don't know. They don't need to know that, right? So, you could go that route too, like my professional social media accounts, it just has like stuff that, I would want my colleagues to know, what we can connect on, some discussions that I couldn't have with some of my friends in my personal life because they're not in my environment of the workplace. So I don't know, some things to think about. Definitely, I would say do your research before you post anything that you might think is controversial, though. So, but there's always people around the GC to help, like Finn, amazing presence on social media, Tina as well. So definitely tap into your resources. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we will have a session specifically on social media. And I think this is probably, like the 4th or 5th we've had in the last year. But we'll have another session in July. So if you have specific questions around social media and the use of social media going forward, definitely tune into that session in July. And I think we have recordings from previous sessions on our Finn YouTube channel as well that you can check out. Okay, the next question. Are there jobs specifically for recent grads? I will be graduating in May 2022 and don't think I will be able to continue to work part-time during the year. Wondering what would be the best way to get back into government once I graduate. La question, c'est par rapport à une personne qui va finir leur étude et puis ils vont finir en mai 2022 et puis il va y avoir des idées par rapport à comment continuer leur carrière quand ils ont fini leur études. So who would like to start with that question? And maybe I'll start this off just to say that post-secondary recruitment should be posting this fall. So usually In September, it kind of identifies what positions will be available. And the interesting thing about that is that you can be graduating generally for lots of those jobs in the next year. So they'll usually specify a graduation date. So you can apply in September and be graduating in May, June. And each of the jobs will specify when the limit of that is. So don't apply in September 2021 if you're graduating in 2024, for example, but it is one of the ways in. But any other ideas around the best way to kind of get back into government if you're going back to school full time and then finishing your studies?
I can only speak from my experience. When I graduated my master's, we were really encouraged to look into D&D runs the PORP, which is the Policy Officer Recruitment Program, I think. There's the APAP, which is the Advanced Policy Analyst Program. And there's a few departments that run similar recruitment programs like that. But as Susan said, super importantly, if you graduate, especially if you worked here as a student, that's not your only way in. So don't feel like you're limited just to that.
Absolutely. Great. Okay, well, this is, I think, a relatively quick one, but how important is learning French when trying to secure a full or part-time position? So any thoughts around this?
I feel like I'm talking a lot, so please, Alexa or Honey, please feel free to cut me off at any point. I do think French definitely helps, and I think it just makes you a really well-rounded public servant. If you're not, it's okay. But, I'd be honest, I invested myself. I was lucky. I used some of my student loans to invest in some French training, and I'm really glad it did because it did open a lot of doors. But Anglophones, you're not at a disadvantage if you don't have it. You might just need to look a little bit harder to find those English essential jobs.
Yeah, I think that's a very good advice. Et je pense que comme ça a ouvert les portes, comme tu as dit. Je pense qu'en total, c'est 30 à 35%, je pense, des positions qui sont bilingues dans le gouvernement du Canada. So about 30 to 35% of positions are bilingual in the government of Canada. Some are unilingual English, some are unilingual French. It definitely opens doors. In my experience, I started in 2009, and I had a colleague who was basically exactly the same in terms of qualification, except for not being bilingual. He got to the same place eventually, but it took it 2 extra years to kind of get through, being a term and, getting to that full-time status eventually. So it definitely has an impact.
I actually find too, personally, in my experience, there are often more bilingual jobs available than there are English essentials. So if you're applying for a job, like Josh mentioned, if you're a bilingual candidate, it might actually be faster to get you in than a unilingual English or unilingual French.
Yeah. And especially if your level of French skills are quite high, like if you're fully fluent in both languages, you are an indispensable resource, and people will want to hire you for sure. So definitely something to keep in mind. I see we are down to 1 minute. So there are lots of questions in the Q&A still. We will be addressing these questions over the next 2 months as we go through our student programming. But I see there's some questions around, are there different programs for mature students? What streams in the government have the best opportunities for students in science? And is there a way to find out for a transfer pool? And then lots of, how do I kind of continue my career? So how do you continue your career? You continue to show up for these sessions every Tuesday from 1:30 to 2:30 and learn more about, how to network, how to use social media, how to maximize your career opportunities going forward. But this has been a very interesting session. I know we have some resources that are posted from this. There are lots of videos on our YouTube channel as well going forward. But Alexa and Tina, fantastic work moderating and setting up this session. So a huge thanks to both of you. Honey and Susan, always a pleasure. And thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your experience. If you are a student or you are a young public servant or new public servant looking to expand your network, start with these 4 people, add them to your LinkedIn network. They can be your first 4 connections if you don't currently have any social media presence. But otherwise, a huge thanks to all of you for sharing your time, your experience, and your advice with us today. Et je veux remercier nos participants qui nous ont joints aujourd'hui pour cette séance. So huge thanks to all of our participants for joining us today. Stay tuned for our next sessions. Marcel has posted all the links, so sign up for everything that you're interested in from now until the end of August. And maximize your opportunities to continue your career in Government of Canada. So thanks very much, everyone. Merci à tous, et puis bonne journée, and we will see you soon. Thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Merci.